with that, I would love to welcome you today to the Wolfpack Wellness Research Web Series. I'm your host, Susie Goodell. I'm an associate professor of nutrition in the Department of Food, Bioprocessing, and Nutrition Sciences. For those of you who aren't familiar, this series is a collaboration between the University Wellness Advisory Committee, NC State Libraries, and NC State WellRec. We aim to discuss wellness research happening across campus. For those of you who are here live via Zoom, you can submit your questions to our speaker in the chat function, and we'll have a time for Q&A at the end. And so today's guest is Dr. Kari Lewis. She has more than 30 years of experience working as an educator, consultant, and board certified ADHD coach. She has a master's degree in special education and a doctorate in curriculum and instruction from NC State University. And her postdoctoral work focused on the quality of life for families of children with disabilities. Dr. Lewis's research focuses on examining the benefits of regular physical exercise on self-esteem and grades for students with ADHD. And today she'll be talking more about this research and a unique class that she created at NC State based on that. So welcome, Dr. Lewis. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so why don't you first tell us a little bit about the research that you've been doing and just this topic in general?
Sure. So as you were saying, it's the research is being done in a class that I teach in the Health and Exercise Studies department. And so the name of the course is Fitness and Wellness. So it's HESF 101. So it's one of the courses that all students have to take, a 100 level course. So it's in the general education requirement. And so what I do is, kind of recruit students that have ADHD to be in this one particular section. And most of the sections that we teach of 101 have, upwards to, 32 to 35 students in it. This class is limited to 15, but I let some additional students in this semester since I've not conducted the research or had the class for the last 2 semesters because it didn't really lend itself to, virtual teaching. So right now there's 20 students in this class, but the curriculum for the class is the same as it is for all of the other HESF 101 sections that I teach. And so the students are required to do certain fitness tests and have a midterm and a final exam to test their knowledge of fitness skills and, in the curriculum that we teach within the department. And then additionally, I take about 10 to 15 minutes of each class and do ADHD coaching. So this is usually done when the students are warming up. So I've got them together as a group and they may be stretching or doing some kind of light cardio to warm up. So I've got the attention of all of them, but we're focusing on some aspect of ADHD coaching, which can incorporate a lot of different things. So what I typically do is model this coaching using the 6 domains of health. So emotional, physical, intellectual, social, so forth, and focus on different topics within each of those areas so that the emphasis of doing all of this is to have a balanced life, not just with schooling and education, but also looking at those ADHD kind of things that are going on, like time management of classes, or studying and homework and possibly having a job or children, all of those kind of things that go into, keeping some balance. And then we also talk about and focus on different topics for about 2 weeks at a time. So things like delaying gratification that people with ADHD, well, all of us have trouble doing from time to time, but people with ADHD struggle with. So that's one of the topics. And another one is being intentional. So we talk a lot about, and this is what I'm doing for the first 2 weeks of this semester, is just focusing on being intentional. So the class that they're in with me right now, it's 50 minutes long. And so really helping them to focus and avoid being distracted with all of those other things that are going on. And so hopefully they can take that they're learning with me through the ADHD coaching part of this and apply it to all of the other classes that they're in. So just an example of what I might do with that, or what I'm going to do with that, that focus for next week is talk to them about what it means to be intentional, get some of their feedback of, what it means to them, if they've ever really practiced being intentional in a setting. And then I'm going to give them a Post-it note. And so things that come to mind to them while I'm talking, or they're supposed to be exercising or learning the muscles of the body, they have the option of using that Post-it note to scribble down whatever's going through their head that is becoming a distraction to them, so that they can come back and focus on what we're doing in class. And that's an easy strategy that they could take into another class, or they could take into, a conversation that they might be having with their parents or a professor or a work setting and so forth. So
that is just amazing work, and it very interesting. So my question for you is what kind of research data do you have on, like, how did you decide that this was the type of class we needed to be having at NC State?
Well, I started working with kids with ADHD back in the mid 90s, because there was a major research study that was done at that time called the Multimodal Treatment Study for children with ADHD. And so the protocol for that was to have kids in this, what they called a summer treatment program. The children were 7 to 10 years old, and the kids were in an academic setting for an hour a day. And then they had physical activity for an hour a day. And they did that for 8 weeks during the summer. And then after that, for the first semester of school, each of the counselors from camp would go and be like a classroom aide in each of those kids' classroom. So the aides were there, nobody knew who they were, what they were doing, but they continued this behavior management system with those kids into the fall of the year. So that's really what, kind of led me to think about combining academics and fitness. And then I don't know if I put this on my little blurb that I gave you or not, I can't remember, but I worked in conjunction with the Diagnostic Teaching Clinic at State back in the, I guess it was the early 90s. And we did a summer camp then and combined academics and fitness. And that was studying the self-esteem of those kids at that time. They were middle schoolers. So they were an at-risk population because they had ADHD or learning disabilities. And then that's what my dissertation was on. And so over the years, it's kind of been in the back of my head, and I just, kind of kept putting it off and putting it off. And, this is a little dream that I had. And then finally, I can't remember when I started this, but I think it's been 5 years ago, but put the research project together and so forth. And just because it is so important to combine the two, and that, we know from research that physical activity obviously is really good for everybody, but particularly those with ADHD, because it helps so much with, that part of the brain and being able to avoid distractions. And, the frontal lobe of the brain is being activated with exercise.
So, you've said that you had to take some time off due to the COVID limitations and everything when classes shut down. What data do you have right now? What kind of data are you collecting when you do have classes going?
Yeah. So what I did the last time that I collected data was we did what's called a LASSI test, LASSI, and that's just it's a survey that students answer, and it diagnoses or evaluates their 10 different aptitudes that have to do with academic success. So I can just name them really quickly. It's attitude, which means an interest in college and academic success; motivation, which is probably self-explanatory; time management; anxiety, which they describe as the degree to which students worry about school and academic performance; study aids; test-taking strategies; a self-testing scale; and information processing; concentrating and selecting main idea. So I give them that as a pre-test, post-test, and then also do the Harvard STEP test, which is stepping up and down on a bench for 3 minutes to assess cardiorespiratory endurance and improvement, and compare those two. So the last set of data that I had with the class was that cardiorespiratory fitness increased, and as a result, anxiety decreased, which is pretty significant. And then the class helped to improve time management as per the Lassie test. And then they just reported in an interview that I did with each one of them at the end of the semester that they felt like their attitude toward academics improved and that their social functioning improved. And one of the things across the board, wasn't necessarily per a questionnaire, but it's what came up with almost every single one of them on the interview that I did post class, was they all said it was really cool to be in a classroom with other students who had ADHD. And so many of them said, which is really a surprise to me, so many of them said, I didn't know that other people had ADHD. And I think to myself, I mean, it almost makes me tear up for them to be, so vocal about that and to have that be something that they perceive as being true in their life, and I explained to them, in a classroom of 100, there's probably at least 20 people in there that have ADHD. And they just feel like many times they're walking around campus and they're the only one experiencing those kind of ADHD symptoms. So that just by itself is enough to, make me want to continue with the class.
Yeah, that's really impactful that if nothing else, they're seeing they're not alone and that
Yes.
others are going through this too.
Yes.
So, some of the things you're talking about, though, they really sound like it's not something that might be unique to students with ADHD, but students in general. Have you considered looking at these same kinds of things in your broader classes?
Well, I haven't. Well, I mean, to some extent I have. I've thought about it, but haven't done anything with it because, I mean, you're right. They're really, if you look at those 10 items in the Lassie scale, they're really applicable to any college student and something that somebody could look at and do a pre-post assessment and say, here's where I need to put a little more emphasis, or here's my strengths at this point in time. And I can, maybe put the brakes on that a bit and focus on something else.
Yeah, it's, this kind of work seems like it's definitely making an impact on students with ADHD. And I'm willing to bet that you're also making an impact at the broader community too.
Well, hopefully, yes.
I can't assume, but that's why we do the research. So, you shared one of the most interesting things that came out of the qualitative interviews, but what are some other findings that you maybe had an aha moment when thinking about, I need to apply this more or tweak my class based on the results of the work that you've been doing?
Well, it's, you ask about taking this to the broader community, but what it's helped me to do, I mean, I've always known that there's, in a I'll say a regular class, not this one that's just for the students with ADHD, that there's going to be kids with ADHD in there or learning disabilities. And even though I know that and I work with that population all the time, I often forget it. And so this has just made me more aware of the way that I present material, the way that I try to, if I see somebody that's in a class, I teach weight training. So they're doing a lot of individual workouts on their own. And so if I see a student that is, just kind of wandering around the room without really applying themselves or using their time wisely, I'll really take more time now and make sure that they understand exactly what's going on and, and be more of a hand holder for those kind of things, because it may be that, somebody's got a processing problem and they just didn't gather that information as quickly when I was presenting the material. And again, like I said, these are things I've known for years, but having worked with just that classroom of students with ADHD, it makes me stop and pay a little bit closer attention.
So I know I'm going off the script with your study question, but as someone who teaches lots of students over the years, right? And I'm teaching 50 students right now in a research class. I can see that, based on what you said, I probably have about 10 or so students that have some sort of ADHD processing disabilities or whatever. So what would a teacher that I'm not in a PE class, but what could I do that might be able to help my students to get them to be able to learn better in my class?
Well, something I think that's happened, Susie, since we had to go virtual for so long, is that we've all figured out how to deliver information in different ways. So that's one thing. And then another thing is, instead of, with this class with ADHD students, I asked them to, give me some written feedback and tell me what I can do different. And so that would be something too, so you might specifically address those students in your class and say, obviously you don't have to divulge to me whether you have a learning disability or you're registered with DRO or anything, but what can I do? Tell me specifically, what can I do in my presentation of this material so that you can either access the information better or that you can process the information better? Are there distractions in the classroom that I'm not aware of that are, you perceive as being distracting? So those are just a couple of things.
That's great. Thank you. And I'm looking at my notes to find out what kind of response have you received from either your students or your peers around this research?
Well, actually, I will say that my peers know, I kind of think just surface what I'm doing, but not really know what's going on. So not too much feedback from them. But I do have students that will return and sometimes send me an email, or I have over 200 students a semester, and I can pass them in the gym, and some of them won't ever say anything to me, but almost every student I've ever had in this class stops and says something. So I think they felt like there's more of a connection. So that's a pretty cool thing. I forgot what else you asked me.
Just, what's the reception been? So I have a question then to follow up with that related to your peers. Is there something that might be preventing your peers from knowing? Is it just that they aren't here today to watch this video? Or is there something that we can do as part of the wellness research group to kind of support others learning about what you're doing and maybe even being able to apply that to their own teaching?
Yeah, I think what you're doing with this wellness series is a huge thing. I'll share the link with them. But, sometimes I just think we're all so busy, and, all of them have 200 students also. Yeah.
It's a challenge when you get busy, but it sounds like what you're doing and the evaluation you've done with these students, it's making a difference, and it's something that we can all learn from. So here's my last question before we get into the Q&A part.
Yeah.
Our group, and is there any controversy around what you're doing? Are there other viewpoints on how to deal with teaching students with ADHD that maybe someone said, nope, I think you're crazy, or not even crazy, but disagree with you this way?
No, I haven't run across that anywhere.
That's wonderful.
I mean, people are really supportive. I've presented this at a couple of conferences and poster presentations, and everybody's very receptive and, supportive of this kind of a class.
That's great. And actually, I'm going to follow up with one more question. When talking about this kind of class, how do people enroll in this class? You said that you do some recruiting with students, but how do you figure that out?
So what I do at the beginning during, prior to registration, I'll send an email to DRO and let them know that the class is being offered. And so it gets out that way. And then if a student wants to register for this class, they have to email me to get permission to be in the class. And then at that point in time, I'll say, this class is restricted to students with ADHD. If that applies to you, then send verification of ADHD. So probably the bulk of the students come from DRO recommending and telling them about the class.
Do they have to have a DRO accommodation?
No, they don't.
Okay.
No.
Well, now we have reached the time in our interview where I really encourage those of you who are on the call or the Zoom link to put your questions in the chat box so I can ask Dr. Lewis questions. And while people are doing that, I'm going to see if I have one more question for you. When you talk about ADHD coaching, is there an actual coaching certificate or anything like that that students or professionals can get to specialize in that area?
Yes, there are. There's a couple of different places that will do certification, and they require, I don't know how many hours of training, but it's a really extensive training. A lot of what I did in my schooling, working on a doctorate, I just had the knowledge anyway, so I was pretty much grandfathered in to get a certificate. But yes, it is possible to do that. And there's probably a great need in this area for more ADHD coaches. And there's surprisingly people, well, maybe not surprisingly, but there's still people that don't know that the profession exists.
I didn't know until today.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. So Aaron asks, do you have any recommendations for students on how to advocate for themselves in other courses and across campus?
Yes. So that's another thing that we talk about in the class as part of the coaching, is that how to, recognize when you need help, exactly what you need for help, and don't assume that somebody's just going to give it to you. And so what I encourage them to do is, they might go to a professor and say, I'm having trouble with blah, blah, blah. But that's not really asking for help. It's just saying I have trouble with something. So for them to be very specific and identify, here's an example. I can't hear you in the classroom because when you turn around and look at the whiteboard, I can't see your lips move and I can't hear you well enough. And then I can't process the information. And what can I do, or how could you help me with that in my, in that class? So.
And I think a lot of students, I know I'm having that same challenge with my students now that we're having to wear masks and things like that.
Yes,
so that's certainly a good example for all of us to try to figure that out. But that advocating is a really important piece.
Yes.
So Phyllis asks, what time of the day, how many times a day, etc., is exercise how is it most beneficial to ADHD students?
Well, there's not really anything in the research that indicates the best time of day to do it. So what I tell my students is whenever you are going to do it consistently is the time of day to do it. And so I will get, not just in this class, but in a lot of classes, and I'm sure the rest of you do too, that teach, have students who were 3-sport athletes in high school. And so their whole day, from the time they get up in the morning till they get through school, they go to practice, they eat dinner, they do their homework, they go to bed. Everything was very rigid and regimented. And so for them, not having that time of day set aside to exercise, sometimes things just fall apart. So what I stress with the kids in this class in particular is that it doesn't matter when you do it, but just do it. So if I worked with a family or, privately with somebody with ADHD, I just have them figure out in their schedule, when are you going to do it on a consistent basis? Are you really going to get up at 6:30 in the morning and do this? And if not, then what about 6:30 in the evening? Yeah. And then sometimes if a person is motivated to do it, just having that burst of the blood flow to the brain right before doing homework can be beneficial. And it doesn't have to be 20 minutes, but it can be a short workout, high intensity interval training. I teach that a lot because it could just be 5 to 10 minutes of in a small space, jog in place. I have one of those desk peddlers. So anything like that, just to create some blood flow to the brain, can be really helpful.
Excellent. So I have a question from Amy that asks, for ADHD students with ADHD. Let me get that out there. Is cardio or strength training more important?
That's another good question, because the research that's been done has been done mostly with cardio, but I suspect that anything is fine. So again, whatever somebody's going to do and do consistently, but it needs, whatever it is, it really needs to be done with some degree of intensity. So, if you're talking cardio, at least middle of your target heart rate range to the upper end of your target heart rate range. If it's lifting weights, then it's not, just, I think I might just do a bench press and then I'm going to get up and mosey around the room for a few minutes and do some squats, but it needs to be pretty quick. One thing, rest for 30 seconds or so, move on to the next thing and keep it going.
Excellent. And David is asking, conventional wisdom is that our digital devices have impacted all of our attention spans and ability to focus. Is what we consider normal in this regard changing?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say so. It is. I tell parents that I work with, those devices are the work of the devil. Because it's taught so many people, so many children, that they've got to have instant gratification, stimulus. And we know, again, from the research and physiology of the brain, that up to, a certain level when the brain's developing, that can really change the circuitry in the brain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so this may add to this. So Phyllis said that her daughter has ADD and has a hard time winding down and sleeping well after a late night of studying. Do you have any recommendation for a good night of restorative sleep?
Yeah. So that can be a big issue also, is that the brain keeps racing and racing. And, if it's all possible to get homework done before dinner time, that would be the big thing, so that the brain can stop with that academic kind of stuff, and then avoid using any kind of screens after dinner. And it's a quiet time where the body starts to relax. So some other things is making sure that the room is dark enough, and that in the morning, as the time changes, this becomes more difficult, but in the morning, be sure that the sun is coming into the room. And so it's not a dark place, but the body needs to prepare for bed, and then it also needs to be hopefully awakened in something that's more natural than just a blaring alarm clock.
Yeah, thank you. And we have one last question. And again, what you just said there, Dr. Lewis, I think applies to all of us too.
Yes,
right?
true.
I'm like, yes, I understand that completely. So Aaron asked, what was the name of your course again? What's the prefix?
It's HESF 101, Fitness and Wellness.
And so how do they find the one that is just for ADHD students?
It would have my name beside it. And yeah, sometimes I teach more than one section, but yeah, it would have my name beside it. And it's, I think it might say, I don't really know what it looks like in the student view, but it might say needs instructor approval. Yeah.
And so are you planning on teaching it, assuming everything is the same as this semester? Are you planning on teaching it again in the spring?
Yes.
Excellent. Yeah. So we can make sure that we share that information with our students and our advisors. Awesome. Well, I want to thank you again, Dr. Lewis, for working with us today and sharing all this wonderful information. And I want to thank everyone here who is watching. I want to remind you that we broadcast every third Friday of the month at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Next month's show will include an interview with Dr. Rodolphe Berengu from my home department. He'll be talking about his work related to CRISPR and gene editing. You can find more information about our work and previous show recordings at the Wolfpack Wellness website. Again, I'm your host, Susie Goodell, and until next time, be well.
Thank you very much.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.